Hi everyone, welcome back to Mission 1820 and this week's episode of Have You Ever Wondered? If you are just joining us, we've been in a series called Books of the Bible, and we've been giving introductions into each book of the Bible in just 5 minutes or less. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this week's book. This week, we're in the book of 2 Corinthians. This is the 8th book of the New Testament, but it's also the 3rd book of the Pauline epistles that were written by the Apostle Paul. Now, this book was written around 56 AD. The letter was written to the church in Corinth, and it was written in order to defend and protect Paul's apostleship. It was also written in order to teach and warn them against the false teachers who were spreading their heresy within the church. But the central theme of 2 Corinthians is that relationship between suffering and the power of the Spirit in Paul's apostolic life, as well as his ministry and in his message. See, the letter encourages readers to live in a much different way, and that was in a way of embracing the life of Jesus Christ. Now, because 1 Corinthians was not really well received by the church of Corinth, Timothy returned from Corinth back to Ephesus where Paul was, and he reported to him that the church was still pretty troubled, and this was largely caused by the arrival in Corinth of those false apostles who were essentially asking the Corinthian believers to live according to the Mosaic tradition. See, Paul wrote the book from Macedonia during his 3rd missionary journey, and it was written sometime between 6 months to a year after he wrote 1 Corinthians. This book of 2 Corinthians is without a doubt the most autobiographical of all of Paul's letters, mainly because it contains numerous references to the hardships that he endured during his ministry. But at the same time, he's defending his apostolic conduct, his character, as well as his calling. This book has 13 chapters, and it consists of 3 parts. Part 1 is called Paul's explanation of his ministry. This is in chapters 1 through 7. Now, part 2 is called Paul's collection for the saints. This is in chapters 8 and 9. And then the 3rd part is called Paul's vindication of his apostleship, and this is in chapters 10 through 13. Paul wrote 2 Corinthians at a very vulnerable time in his life. You see, he learned that the church at Corinth was struggling, and he sought to take action in order to preserve the unity of that local body of believers. This letter is riddled with personal comments because Paul's revealing details about the persecution that he had suffered for the sake of Christ, as well as about that mysterious thorn in his flesh that kept him reliant on God. See, Paul constantly struggled with those who would mislead God's people, and he poured his life into spreading the gospel to all that he could. But why is this book important for us to read? Well, Paul's letter is about weakness and suffering, which the world tells us is wrong. Value, the world says, is proudly measured by strength, triumph, fame, and the world tries to tell us that we need to be perfect to be accepted. You see, Paul is at his most vulnerable in this letter, where he accepts charges of weakness as a sign of harmony with the humility of the cross. And Paul tells us that his power is made perfect in his weakness. Paul's letter shows how he exemplified Christian living without any pretense or ego or boasting, but rather with sincerity, honesty, and humility pointing to the grace of Christ. So as you read Paul's letter, listen to his words of love and exhortation and be committed to the truth of God's word. So with that, I hope this introduction gets you started in the book of 1 Corinthians. So God bless, and thanks for watching.